kind enough to join us here on the show. Farhad, give us the background of the story and where we are today.
Well, good morning, Ray, and thanks for having me on the show. Always a pleasure to hear from you, and it's an honor to be on the show, as always, and speak to your listeners. Ray, here's where we are in immigration right now. We've got essentially a situation where we've got a couple of executive orders. One is about border security, the other is about interior enforcement. And both of those are pretty much hewing to the campaign promises that Trump made when he was running for president, and we have a huge increase in enforcement. Increase in enforcement is fine if it's targeted at people who are serious offenders, violent felons, things of that sort. There is absolutely no problem in doing that. We need to get people like this out of the country. I don't think you're going to find too many people who are going to be up in arms about that. The problem that we have is more important, though, Ray, and it's focused on two issues. Number one, due process. In the rush to get people out of the country, we must not abandon our concepts of due process, which makes us who we are, which makes us America. And number two, hand in hand with the concept of due process, is the issue of what constitutes a felony that is subject to removal. Those are two issues I'd like to talk about some more with you as we go on through the show this morning.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about this situation now. You have a lady who has some sons in the country, and there's a chance she could be deported because of a felon arrest going back over 10 years ago. So take us to this specific story, Farhad.
Very good. I will do that. My client is a lady who has come to this country legally and overstayed her visa. She has 3 children. All 3 are U.S. citizen boys, wonderful children. The eldest has severe Down syndrome, and he's also a U.S. citizen, as I mentioned earlier. Now, she committed a felony, was accused of a felony back in 2004, and because she was a single mother at that time, struggling, no legal assistance, no help, no hope, essentially pled guilty so that she could get out of the court system and be reunited essentially with her 3 children. She could not afford naturally to be convicted and sent to prison because nobody would be there to look after the boys. So we find ourselves with a lady who essentially pled guilty to get out of the system to take care of her kids. And now, 13 years later, we're finding that she could be subject to removal under Trump's enhanced enforcement priorities.
Okay, so Farhad, that's the good background in the story. How has Trump's policy differed from President Obama's policy in regards to the same situation that may have happened under President Obama?
Well, under President Obama, we had a situation where, as a felon, yes, my client, Rosa, was still removable from the United States. But ICE at that time had a lot more leeway in deciding which cases to actually prosecute for removal, which cases weren't going to be treated as seriously or severely. And this case fell into the latter category. I will give ICE in Cleveland enormous credit. You have to give credit where credit is due. They're a decent bunch of people up in Cleveland running the ICE operation there, from my experience, that is, okay? And you've got to give them credit where credit is due. They have been keeping her in the USA now for all these years on what is called an order of supervision, which essentially is an act of administrative grace. They're saying essentially, we are not going to enforce the removal order against her. Under the new enforcement priorities, there is no leeway for someone to give you that discretion. And so that is what my concern is about, that under the new executive actions, Rosa could very well find that the time has run out and she could be sent back.
Okay.
Then the problem is, who's going to look after these 3 kids?
Farhad, my next question to that is, what can be done on her behalf at this point?
Well, I have already filed an appeal with the 9th District Court of Appeals here in Akron, and we've got some very fine attorneys who've collaborated to assist in filing this appeal. Also, I had reached out last week to the Summit County Prosecutor's Office with the hope of getting this case reopened and the conviction vacated. And I heard back from them, and they indicated they would not join with me in a motion to reopen and vacate this very deserving case. Which brings me to a point I do want to make, Ray, which is in the interest of justice, which is what we're all here for, okay? The courts are here for justice, supposedly. The lawyers are here for justice, supposedly. The prosecutors are here for justice, supposedly. In the interest of justice, right? When you have a person who is accused, who doesn't understand the law, who doesn't even understand the language, and is taking a plea which he or she does not understand, is that truly justice? And when the time comes up to reopen and vacate that plea on something which is a non-violent felony, then I challenge the prosecutor's office to come up with an honest solution to reopening that case, and then maybe re-prosecuting the person if necessary, but reopening the case and vacating the conviction. After all, that is justice. Someone should not be essentially railroaded into taking a plea.
Yeah. With us, immigration attorney Farhad Sethna. If you had to roll back that case where she filed, guilty in the situation to get out of the system, where is the guilty party there? Does it lie with the attorney at that time? Is it the system? Because that's really where this all starts, right, Farhad?
I wouldn't say there's guilt to be assigned or even blame to be assigned. Ray, the law is an evolution. The entry of aliens into the United States and their increased entry into the criminal justice system is also an evolution. I give the state of Ohio great credit because in the last 5 to 7 years, they have implemented very significant guidelines for interpretation in the courts. That's very critical because, as I said earlier, if you don't understand the law and you don't understand the charges, how are you supposed to be actually intelligently and voluntarily pleading guilty? But Rosa never had these protections. That's my argument to the prosecutor. Rosa never had these protections. She deserves these protections. This is a case which is a non-violent felony. She needs to have a chance to get it reopened and then recharge her if you want to. But then at least she has the benefit of counsel and of a full-featured defense.
Farhad, in cases like this, what happens to these 3 children who are both USA citizens if the mother is deported? What happens in these cases?
That's a great question, Ray, and I'm seeing families throughout the USA who are dealing with this issue. Some families might take their kids back with them. Other families, and I have a great group of people, I'm going to put in a plug right now, and a shout-out to this great group of people over at the working at the juvenile court in Akron, and we're coming up with a draft of orders for custody and guardianship as well as powers of attorney. So people who are removed from the USA but have U.S. citizen children can execute those orders, have the children safe in the USA with a family member or a friend who they trust, and then have those kids continue with their education uninterrupted. So in those cases, we've got, possibly an avenue for those kids to stay in the country. In other cases, maybe the kids are too young, the parents aren't happy with, aren't sure of whom to leave the kids with. They'll take their kids with them, which brings me to my last point on the same issue. We are now sending U.S. citizen kids, Ray, back in some cases to substandard education, substandard health care, and substandard standard of living, as well as increased criminal activity. Very bad for our U.S. citizen kids.
With us this morning, immigration attorney Farhad Sethna. And Farhad, they're speaking about in an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours down the line here, about maybe some changes as far as the new travel ban in the United States. Being an immigration attorney, have you got wind on any of the changes that we expect to see?
Pretty much, I think, Ray, you and I are on the same page there. A few pieces of information. One of them, of course, is that Iraq is not going to be on the list of countries that are banned. And now Syrian refugees apparently will not have an indefinite ban against them. Those are 2 key pieces of information that I know of at this point in time. I certainly hope that Trump has thought this out a lot more than he did the previous order, which was a very knee-jerk reaction. I also understand that permanent residents, people who have green cards, are not going to be barred from the USA, as well as aliens who have legal visas to enter the USA who are not from these 6 countries. So we will see. I think, obviously, Ray, there's 2 points here. Number one, the devil is in the details. And number 2, as much as I hate to say it, Ray, there are people at U.S. Customs and Border Protection, not all of them, but some of them, some of these agents who are taking this order in the most draconian fashion, implementing it in the worst way possible, in the harshest way possible, including excluding people who are just Muslim. I know of this, Ray. I can tell you this personally. I know of this. I'm not making this up. Including excluding people who are Muslim, as well as essentially detaining people for hours on end with little or no cause to do so at the airport. So we've got some real problems there in the way the orders are being implemented by Customs and Border Protection.